Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is William Bellamy. I'm a military veteran. I'm a former corrections officer. I work with veterans in workforce development, where I came into contact with the treatment courts. I was also selected by the current governor of Missouri to serve as his director of veteran services for a time. This is a brand new channel, so if you like what you hear, like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you disagree with it, go ahead and subscribe and dislike and tell me down in the comments what you disagree with, because we can have a civil debate, or maybe you can even change my mind. But I'm here to talk to you about Black Lives Matter and Antifa today, and how they cross over into Marxism and some of the effects that Marxism has had in the history of the world. Now, for a little bit of background, as a resident of Missouri, I was actually living in Missouri when the incident with Michael Brown happened and the riots in Ferguson happened. I had friends that went up as part of the protesters. I also have friends who were in law enforcement at that time. So I can look at both sides of the issue. And the issue I had then and the issue I had to this day is violence for the sake of violence, because that's what it's become, will accomplish nothing. Michael Brown's memory was not served by burning down downtown Ferguson, just like the LA riots in the 90s. What they accomplished was destroying neighborhoods they could least afford to rebuild after they were destroyed. I've linked the Black Lives Matter website in the description. There's also a link to the Black Lives Matter founders discussing Marxism. But let's go ahead and delve into Black Lives Matter. I'm going to read a quote from the webpage because I find it very telling. We affirm the lives of Black, queer, and trans folks, disabled folks, undocumented folks, folks with records, women, and all Black lives along the gender spectrum. That's a direct quote from the Black Lives Matter website. And it sounds really good. It's kind of like reading the Communist Manifesto. It sounds really great until you see it in operation. Well, unfortunately, the Black lives that don't matter are the people of color that died of gun violence in Chicago. I've never seen them once protest that. I've never seen them once break a window or throw anything at police about those lives when they're lost. David Dorn, in his 70s, retired St. Louis police officer, store owner, was killed outside his store in St. Louis. I saw no protest for that. I hear names called at Senator Tim Scott because he does not agree with them politically. But that's okay, because his life doesn't matter to them. Now, the other link with the founder of Black Lives Matter, they talk about being trained Marxist. And as a veteran, I've been to quite a few third world countries. I discussed it a bit in the About section of the page itself. But the thumbnail I put up for this was from Minneapolis. That thumbnail from Minneapolis could represent Kandahar or Kabul, Afghanistan, Mogadishu, Somalia, or a half a dozen other third world countries where they cannot have a peaceful transition of power. They cannot have a civil discussion about anything because lawlessness runs rampant. That's what's going on in many of our major cities now. Now, this brings us to Antifa. If it's an idea, it's a pretty powerful idea. Never seen an idea that can kill people or break windows or set buildings on fire or assault police officers with bricks and cans and industrial grade fireworks. They talk about defund the police. Well, here's what's funny, and I'll go into this later in another video specifically on defunding the police, but the same council people, they're voting to defund the police, and the same mayors that agree with it and espouse it. Comrade de Blasio is a great example of that. They either have police or private security. So that's paid for by the people. So the same people that can least afford to protect themselves in cities where they're not allowed to own firearms, their leaders want to take their police away, the only protection they're allowed to have. And yet, either use those same police to protect themselves or to fund private security. Now, as a veteran, a lot of private security are veterans, so it's great for them. But it's not fair to that single mom who can't afford to move, who can't afford to leave the city she lives in because she's got mouths to feed. But now they're going to take that little bit of protection she has away from her. Now, with Antifa and Black Lives Matter, when they talk about Marxism, I'll give you two examples of Marxist. Two slightly different versions of them. Stalin and Mao. Chairman Mao in China killed people for decades through man-made famine, through re-education camps. And I'll go into this farther in another video that I'll do on the Soviet Union and China, and another on Zimbabwe and Venezuela, modern-day Marxist/communist states. Because if you actually look at the history, socialism and Marxism lead to communism without fail. And those become failed states in more ways than one. But they also have another thing in common, totalitarianism. Because that's what Black Lives Matter and Antifa stands for. They want to be in charge. They want to be the thought police. They want to tell you what to think, how to think, and when to think. The same way that happened under Stalin or Lenin. The same thing happened under Mao. The same thing still happens to this day in North Korea daily. Where making a simple comment against your government could lead to you being put in a concentration camp. Now, there is no perfect solution. And I can quote Winston Churchill on this, with democracy is the worst system in the world, except for all the rest. The difference here, we should have, and historically have had the ability to have civil discussions about what's wrong with our country. Do I think there are issues with some police? Yes. Do I think organizations like Black Lives Matter were founded based on wanting to destroy and break people's stuff? No, I do not. I think it was founded for a good reason. I think along the way it has been led astray. I think the fact that you see video after video of members of Black Lives Matter and Antifa who are as Caucasian as I am, generally from wealthy families, surrounding people of color, and demanding that they accept their advice on what would make their life better. These are the things that bother me about it. And just to clarify, it's not that I hate organizations that look out for people of color. I do not. I dislike any organization that thinks violence is a solution in this upcoming civil war they're talking about. I'm completely against it. I feel no reason that we need to have a civil war, that we cannot take all the people involved and sit down around a table and come up with solutions. But you want solutions? It's not defund the police. It's not burning down your cities. It's talking. It's political change. All the way back to 2014, when the riots happened in Ferguson, there's been a major issue brewing, and it just seems to get worse and worse, and we become more and more separated along imaginary lines. Now, with that being said, yes, I think Black Lives Matter and Antifa do lead to senseless violence. But I also do not agree with the 3% movement, because we don't need a civil war. We have a constitution. There are ways built in the Constitution to make this change. You do it by voting. You vote in your leaders. Places like Portland and Chicago, yes, there's horrible things going on there. Chicago has been violent for as long as anybody can remember. Then vote out your current leaders. Vote in leaders who can make a change. Honestly, they don't even have to have a political history. The politicians have led us to where we are now. So vote them all out. Vote in new people, because they really do any worse. Now, in the future, I'm going to do 2 parts on Marxism and communism. One will be on the Soviet Union and China. The other will be on Zimbabwe and Venezuela, who are more recent converts to socialism/Marxism. In the description box, I added a link to a channel called The Voice from North Korea, which can describe what goes on in a current communist country. She escaped from North Korea as a child. Very powerful, very strong, intelligent woman who can say it far better than I could. I've also added links to Tim Pool's 2 channels, because he's a liberal who has shifted and decided to vote for Trump based on a lot of reasons. But check them out. Give credit where credit's due, because they do have great information, and this channel's just starting. So if you like what I have to say, please subscribe and like. As I said, if you disagree, then dislike. Subscribe. Put in the comments what you disagree with. We can have a civil discussion about it. And like I said, maybe you can even change my mind. But subscribe, share, that's the best thing you can do for this channel at this time. Thanks for your time, and there'll be more to follow.